The Grand Canyon, Monument Valley, Bryce Canyon, these are landscapes we are taught to view through the lens of deep time. We are told these formations took millions of years to carve through the slow, patient work of erosion and natural weathering. We picture wind and water gradually sculpting rock over geological eras. But what if that narrative is fundamentally flawed? What if these massive features were carved out in decades rather than millennia? The evidence isn't hidden in a laboratory. It is sitting right beneath our feet, scattered across thousands of square miles in the American Southwest. This region isn't just a barren wasteland, it's a debris field of such staggering proportions that the scale of what was removed is almost impossible to comprehend. Before we can discuss the force that carved the canyons, we must examine what was left behind. In any industrial-scale mining operation, the extraction of material is always accompanied by the creation of massive amounts of waste. When you walk through the deserts of Arizona, New Mexico, or southern Utah, you see endless stretches of sand, gravel, and millions of tons of crushed rock. We call it desert and assume it is natural, but natural erosion does not typically create such uniform debris fields. Nature creates riverbeds, alluvial fans, and gradual slopes. What we see in the Southwest is different. Material is chunked, piled, and sometimes sorted by size. It looks exactly like the tailings you would find near a modern quarry, except these tailings cover entire states. If you pick up a handful of desert sand and examine it closely, you may notice that the grains are often angular, sharp-edged, and irregular. These particles haven't been worn smooth with water over millions of years. They appear fractured and pulverized by mechanical force. This is the signature of industrial processing. When rock is crushed in a mill, it produces angular fragments. When nature erodes rock gradually, the edges are rounded. The fact that the desert floor is covered in these angular fragments suggests a history of mechanical crushing rather than natural breakdown. Consider the geometry of Monument Valley. We are told these massive buttes are the remnants of ancient plateaus that eroded away until only the hardest rock remained. However, these formations aren't random. They are often evenly spaced, rising at similar angles, and the desert floor between them is perfectly level for miles. If water carved this landscape, the river system required to move that much material is nowhere to be found. The Colorado River and its tributaries simply aren't large enough to account for this. Interestingly, the spacing between these buttes, roughly 800 to 1,200 feet apart, is too consistent to be a random result of nature. In modern mining, specifically in room and pillar operations, pillars of unmined material are left every few hundred feet to support the overhead rock and prevent collapse. Monument Valley looks like this principle applied on a global scale. These buttes may not be leftovers from erosion, they may be support columns left behind to stabilize a structure that once sat above them. The vertical or near-vertical smooth faces of these buttes challenge the erosion theory. Natural erosion creates slopes and irregular contours, but many of these walls look machined or cut. The Grand Canyon presents similar anomalies. Over a mile deep and up to 18 miles wide, the canyon is attributed to the Colorado River over 6 million years. Yet from the rim, the river looks like a tiny thread, seemingly incapable of creating such a massive chasm. Rivers typically carve V-shaped valleys, cutting deepest where the current is strongest. The Grand Canyon, however, features vertical walls and sheer cliffs that drop thousands of feet. Furthermore, the sedimentary layers exposed in the canyon, limestone, sandstone, and shale, are stacked with knife-edge precision. They maintain perfect horizontal alignment for hundreds of miles with no warping or mixing at the boundaries. This suggests they were sliced and extracted layer by layer with precision tools rather than weathered over eons. The sheer volume of missing material is another mathematical hurdle. The Grand Canyon contains approximately 1,000 cubic miles of missing material, weighing over 10 trillion tons. Even if the Colorado River moved 10 times its modern sediment load every day for 6 million years, the numbers don't add up. The sediment deposits downstream and the delta at the river's end are simply not large enough to contain all that missing rock. This leads to a startling possibility. The rock isn't downstream because it's right there, spread across the desert floor as the sand and gravel we walk on today. This pattern isn't unique to North America. You can find it in the Atacama Desert in Chile, the Empty Quarter in Saudi Arabia, and the Gobi Desert in Mongolia. These are global debris fields sharing the same characteristics: massive sediment deposits with no clear source, and canyons with geometries that defy natural erosion. In the Atacama, one of the driest places on Earth, valleys look perfectly straight, with walls dropping vertically for hundreds of feet, despite there being almost no water to carve them. In some areas, gravel is even sorted by color, red in one zone, white in another. Wind and water don't sort material by color. Industrial processing does. So if this wasn't nature, who was responsible? Some point to the theory of a lost advanced civilization, sometimes referred to as Tartaria. Maps from the 1700s showed Tartaria as a massive empire covering most of northern Asia before it vanished from the record in the 1800s. Whether a unified empire or a series of advanced cultures, the architectural and infrastructural evidence they left behind is undeniable. Massive stone structures, foundations reaching 50 feet deep, and vast canal systems. If such a civilization possessed the engineering capability for these structures, then large-scale mining is a logical extension of their activity. Advanced civilizations require massive amounts of raw materials, metals, and stone. They move mountains and reshape landscapes. The mud flood theory offers a potential timeline for when this world was lost. It suggests a catastrophic event in the early 1800s buried the lower levels of cities worldwide. This would explain why many old buildings have basement windows at street level, and why our official history seems to start a clean slate in the mid-19th century. In this alternative timeline, an advanced civilization mined resources on a scale we can't imagine, carving the canyons and excavating the plateaus we see today. Following a global reset or destruction, the civilization collapsed. The survivors or new inhabitants looked at the debris fields and called them deserts. They looked at the carved canyons and attributed them to millions of years of natural processes, rewriting history to make the past seem primitive. The evidence remains for anyone willing to look. The vertical walls of the canyons, the perfectly horizontal layers, and the angular, crushed stone of the desert floor all tell a different story. This isn't just speculation, it's an observation of a landscape that looks more like an industrial graveyard than a natural wilderness. If an advanced civilization operated on this scale only a few centuries ago, our understanding of human progress is fundamentally wrong. We didn't steadily climb from primitive to advanced. We may have fallen and forgotten.